Dr. Sarah Chun walked through the massive corridors of Galactic Station Prime for what felt like the 1000th time. Her shoes clicked against the smooth metal floor as she carried her datapad filled with documents, charts, and desperate pleas. Today was petition day number 1247. The station was enormous. It had to be, to hold representatives from 847 different species. Some aliens were tiny, no bigger than Earth insects. Others were so large they needed special chambers just to fit inside. The air smelled strange here, a mix of different atmospheres that somehow worked for everyone but felt natural to no one. Sarah stopped at the main entrance to the arbitration chamber. The doors were 30 feet tall and made of some material that shifted colors as she watched. 2 guard creatures stood on either side. They looked like walking trees with too many eyes. They had been there every time Sarah visited. They never spoke to her. "Dr. Chun from Earth," she said to one guard. "Here for scheduled hearing 4,847,293. The guard's many eyes blinked in sequence. A slot opened in the wall next to Sarah. She placed her hand inside. A blue light scanned her fingers and palm. A moment later, the massive doors opened with a sound like distant thunder. The arbitration chamber was the size of a football stadium. Thousands of seats rose up in circles around a central platform. Most seats were empty today. Most seats were always empty. Sarah walked to the center platform. Her footsteps echoed in the huge space. She looked up at the beings who would decide humanity's fate. Again, the Vorthic representative was there, a slug-like creature with dozens of eye stalks. Right now, half of those eyes were looking at Sarah while the others watched 3 different holographic displays, showing trade negotiations with other species. The representative was literally doing other business while Sarah presented her case. The ethereal collective's representative was barely visible, shifting between solid and gas form. Sometimes Sarah could see a vague outline. Sometimes there was just empty air. She had never heard this being speak during any of her presentations. Above them all sat the AI mediator unit. It looked like a floating metal sphere covered in lights. Sarah knew this machine was probably running hundreds of different cases at the same time. Humans were just one small process in its massive digital mind. "Honorable representatives," Sarah began, using the formal words she had memorized years ago. "I come before you today to present petition 4,847,293 regarding humanity's request for basic mining rights in the Kepler expanse." She activated her datapad. Holographic images appeared in the air around her. Charts showing human colony ships. Maps of the Kepler expanse. Photos of families who had traveled across space to build new lives. Humanity has been waiting for approval of this petition for 12 years, Sarah continued. "We have followed every protocol. We have met every requirement. We have submitted every form and paid every fee." She gestured to a chart showing human colonies across space. Red dots marked the ones that were failing. There were a lot of red dots. Without access to the mineral resources in Kepler expanse, 17 human colonies will fail within the next 2 years. These are not military outposts or industrial sites. These are homes, families, children who were born among the stars and know no other life. Sarah showed pictures of the colonies. Small dome cities on airless worlds. Farms carved out of hostile soil. Schools where human children learned alongside the kids of other species who had also come seeking better lives. The Kepler expanse has been listed as unclaimed territory for over 50 years, Sarah said. Human survey teams have confirmed that no other species has active claims or operations in this region. We are not asking to take anything from anyone. We are asking for permission to take resources that no one else wants or needs. The Vorthic representative's eye stalk swiveled towards Sarah for a moment. Then most of them went back to watching the trade negotiations. One eye stalk remained focused on her, but Sarah could see boredom in its unblinking stare. "Our children are hungry," Sarah said, her voice growing stronger. "Our medical facilities lack basic supplies. Our terraforming projects are failing because we cannot get the minerals we need to maintain our equipment." She showed them video messages from the colonies. A doctor explaining how many people had died because they could not get replacement parts for medical machines. A teacher talking about schools that had to close because the air recycling systems were breaking down. A farmer holding the withered remains of crops that failed because the soil treatment plants needed new filters. "We have submitted over 40,000 pages of environmental impact studies," Sarah continued. "We have provided detailed plans for sustainable mining practices. We have agreed to follow all galactic conservation protocols. We have even offered to share our technological innovations with any species that wants them." The ethereal collective's representative faded completely from view. Sarah was not sure if this meant they were thinking deeply about her words or if they had simply left to attend to more important business. "Humanity has been a member of this council for 127 years, Sarah said. "In that time, we have never broken galactic law. We have never started conflicts with other species. We have paid our fees, followed your rules, and waited patiently for our requests to be considered." She paused and looked directly at each representative. "All we are asking for is the same right that every other species in this chamber already has. The right to provide for our people. The right to mine resources in space that belongs to no one else. The right to exist." Sarah finished her presentation and stood in the center of the platform. The chamber was quiet, except for the distant hum of the station's engines. She waited for questions. She waited for discussion. She waited for any sign that someone had actually listened to her words. The eye mediator's lights flashed once. A holographic document appeared in front of Sarah. She did not need to read it. She had seen the same document 1,246 times before. Petition 4,847,293 has been received and will be reviewed by the appropriate subcommittee. Estimated processing time, 15 to 30 standard years. Sarah's hand shook as she took the document. 30 years. The children in those failing colonies would be grandparents by the time this petition was reviewed. Most of them would probably be dead. She walked out of the chamber without saying another word. Behind her, the representatives continued their other business. The Vorthic completed 2 trade deals before Sarah reached the doors. The Eye Mediator processed 47 other cases. The ethereal collective never reappeared in the corridors outside. Sarah passed a news display. The headlines scrolled past in dozens of languages. Colony ship Aurora returns to Earth. Mission failed. Resource wars break out in Tau Ceti system. Human population growth slows for 7th consecutive year. Sarah stopped walking and stared at the screen. For over a century, humanity had played by the rules. They had been patient. They had been polite. They had asked permission for everything and waited for answers that never came. And while they waited, people died. Captain Marcus Rodriguez had seen many bad days in his 30 years of space travel. But watching his crew die in the medical bay of the mining vessel New Horizon was the worst day of his life. "How many?" asked Dr. Elena Vasquez, director of the Human Colonial Authority. She had come to Luna Station as soon as she heard about the incident. Marcus looked down at his hands. They were shaking, and he could not make them stop. 17 dead. 23 more who will never see their families again. The radiation damage is too severe. Marcus had commanded mining operations for 15 years. He knew every safety protocol, every galactic regulation about asteroid mining. His crew had followed all the rules when they approached the asteroid field in the Deneb sector. "Tell me what happened," Elena said quietly. Marcus closed his eyes and remembered. "We scanned the field first. 3 days of detailed scans. No ownership beacons. No active claims. No warning signals. According to galactic law, it was free salvage. We sent in the mining drones and started extraction on the largest asteroid." He paused and took a shaky breath. That's when they came. 6 hegemony enforcement ships. Military grade. They didn't send the warning. They didn't try to contact us. They just started shooting. Elena felt sick. "What did you tell them?" "We tried to explain," Marcus said. "We sent them our permits, our scanning data, proof that the field was unclaimed. One of their captains responded directly to our bridge." Marcus looked up at Elena with eyes full of anger and pain. He laughed. He actually laughed at us. Then he said humans were good for entertainment value. He said watching us beg was amusing. Elena's hands curled into fists. In her 40 years of diplomatic work, she had faced many insults and challenges. But this was different. This was cruelty for its own sake. "They used radiation weapons," Marcus continued. "Not quick kill shots. Weapons designed to cause slow death. They wanted my people to suffer. And when we tried to retreat, they followed us for 3 hours, taking shots at our engines. Like we were prey in a hunting game." Elena looked through the medical bay windows. Human crew members lay in biobeds, their bodies fighting radiation poisoning. Some were young people, barely out of training. Others had families waiting for them on distant colonies. "Dr. Vasquez," called a nurse. "You have urgent messages from 3 other colony ships." Elena felt her heart sink. "What kind of messages?" The nurse handed her a data pad. Elena read the first message and felt her face go pale. Then she read the second message. Then the third. "Marcus, I need to go," she said. "Rest and take care of your crew. We will handle this." Elena took a shuttle back to Earth immediately. During the 6-hour journey, she received 14 more emergency messages. By the time she reached the Human Colonial Authority headquarters, she knew that something fundamental had changed in the galaxy. The emergency meeting room was full when Elena arrived. Representatives from every human world were present, either in person or through quantum communication links. Elena had never seen so many human leaders in one place at the same time. "Report," said Admiral James Harrison. He was an old man now, but his voice still carried the authority of someone who had spent decades protecting human space. Elena activated the main display screen. 4 major incidents in the past week. The New Horizon attack was just the beginning. The screen showed a map of human space. Red warning symbols appeared in 4 different locations. 3 days ago, the medical ship Mercy was denied passage through consortium space. Elena began. They were carrying vaccines to Kepler 442b, where a plague outbreak has killed 12,000 people so far. She touched the screen and showed the ship's route. The consortium forced them to take a path that adds 2 months to their journey. By the time Mercy reaches Kepler 442b, our computer models predict that 40,000 more people will be dead. Angry voices filled the room. Elena waited for quiet before continuing. 2 days ago, Dr. Kim's archaeological team made a discovery on New Crete, she said. They found ruins of an ancient civilization that could change our understanding of galactic history. The artifacts were over 50,000 years old. She showed pictures of the dig site. Strange buildings made of materials that seemed to shift color in the light. Symbols carved in stone that looked almost like human writing. The Vorthic Authority confiscated everything, Elena said. All artifacts, all research data, all recorded discoveries. They said humans lack the cultural sophistication to interpret galactic heritage sites. Dr. Sarah Chun, who had just returned from her latest failed petition, spoke up. Our team worked for 3 years on that dig. They found evidence that could prove humans had contact with other species long before we developed spaceflight. Now it's all gone. Elena nodded and continued. Yesterday, the Ethereal Collective began construction of a hyperspace relay station. The problem is, they decided to build it directly through human space. The screen showed the construction site. Massive alien machines were tearing apart asteroids and small planets to build their relay. In the path of construction were 3 human settlements and a research station. They destroyed the research facility first, Elena said. 43 people lived and worked there. The collective gave them 6 hours to evacuate before they started demolition. Representative Johnson from the Centauri colony stood up. What about compensation? Elena laughed, but there was no humor in it. Standard compensation. Enough to buy a small apartment on Earth for a facility that cost us 50 million credits and 15 years of research. The room was completely silent. Elena looked at each representative before continuing. But the worst part happened this morning, she said. The colony ship Pioneer was scheduled to pass through the Rigel checkpoint. Routine inspection. The ship was carrying 3,000 colonists, including 800 children. She paused and took a deep breath. Hegemony inspectors decided the ship was carrying too much human cultural material. They confiscated all books, art, music recordings, and historical documents. They said human culture was too primitive to spread to other worlds. Dr. Chun gasped. Those families were starting a new colony. Those cultural items were all they had to remember Earth. Elena nodded. The inspectors told the colonists they could continue to their destination, but only if they promised to adopt approved galactic cultural standards. No human languages. No human traditions. No human history taught to their children. Admiral Harrison stood up slowly. His face was red with anger. They want us to stop being human. The colonists refused, Elena continued. The ship is returning to Earth now. 3,000 people who sold everything they owned for a chance at a new life, coming home with nothing. The room erupted in angry voices. Representatives shouted over each other. Some called for military action. Others demanded immediate withdrawal from the galactic community. A few suggested filing formal protests through diplomatic channels. Admiral Harrison raised his hand for silence. We have been asking permission to exist for over a century, he said in his steady voice. Maybe it's time we stopped asking. Representative Martinez from the Mars colonies spoke up. What exactly are you suggesting, Admiral? Harrison looked around the room. I'm suggesting we remember who we are. Humans didn't ask permission when we climbed out of caves. We didn't ask permission when we built cities or invented agriculture or developed medicine. We didn't ask permission when we reached for the stars. He gestured to the map of human space. We have 200 million people living in this galaxy. We have colonies on 300 worlds. We have technologies that work, cultures that matter, and children who deserve a future. Dr. Chun stood up. The Admiral is right. I have spent 15 years begging alien bureaucrats for basic human rights. I have been patient. I have been polite. I have followed every rule and waited for every decision. She looked directly at Admiral Harrison. And our people keep dying while we wait. Elena felt something change in the room. A decision was forming, even though no one had voted yet. What do you propose? Asked Representative Kim. Admiral Harrison smiled for the first time in weeks. I propose we stop being a junior associate species and start being humans. The debate lasted 18 hours. Elena Vasquez watched as representatives from every human world argued about humanity's future. Some voices were angry. Others were scared. All of them were tired of being treated like children. "We should leave the Galactic Council completely," said Representative Wong from the Tau Ceti colonies. "Pack up, go home, and build our own civilization without alien interference." Representative Martinez shook his head. "If we withdraw from galactic society, we lose access to trade routes. Our colonies need resources we can't produce ourselves. People will die." "People are already dying," said Dr. Sarah Chun. "The question is whether we die as free humans or as pets in an alien zoo." Admiral Harrison listened to every argument. He had fought in 3 small wars during his career, always defending human interests against raiders and pirates. But he knew that military action against the major galactic powers would be suicide. "Military response is not an option," he said when the debate turned to armed resistance. "The hegemony has fleets that could turn Earth into dust. The consortium has weapons we don't even understand. We might win a few battles, but we would lose the war." Representative Johnson from the Europa colonies spoke up. "So what do we do? Keep begging? Keep watching our people suffer while aliens decide whether we deserve basic rights?" Elena had been thinking about this question for hours. As director of the Human Colonial Authority, she understood both human needs and galactic politics. She knew there had to be a third option. "What if we stopped asking permission?" she said quietly. The room went silent. Everyone looked at her. "Explain," said Admiral Harrison. Elena stood up and activated the wall display. It showed a map of human space, all the worlds where humans lived, worked, and raised families. "For 127 years, we have followed a simple pattern," she said. "We ask the Galactic Council for permission to do things. They ignore us or say no. We ask again. They ignore us again. Meanwhile, our people suffer." She highlighted the human-controlled systems in blue. "But what if we stopped asking? What if we simply governed ourselves within our own territory?" Dr. Chun leaned forward. "That sounds like rebellion." "No," Elena said. "Every species in the galaxy has the right to govern their own territory. The hegemony doesn't ask permission to mine asteroids in their space. The consortium doesn't ask permission to build trade stations. The Vorthic Authority doesn't ask permission to enforce their laws." Admiral Harrison was beginning to understand. "You're suggesting we exercise the same rights they already have?" Elena nodded. "Exactly. We continue to follow galactic law when it makes sense. We continue to trade with other species. We continue to be members of the Galactic Council. But within human space, we make our own decisions." Representative Martinez looked worried. "What about the major powers? They won't like us acting independently." "They already don't like us," said Dr. Chun. "The difference is that now we stop caring what they think." Elena expanded the map to show trade routes and resource locations. "We've been studying galactic politics for over a century. We know how the system works. The major powers maintain control through bureaucracy, not military force. They make other species ask permission for everything." She pointed to several systems on the map. The Kepler Expanse, the Ross 128 Corridor, the Barnard Star mining fields. These areas are in human space, but we've been waiting for alien permission to use them. What if we just use them? Admiral Harrison was looking at the strategic implications. "We would need to be careful. No direct challenges to major power interests. No violations of core galactic laws. Just quiet assertion of basic sovereignty rights." "Exactly," Elena said. "We're not declaring war. We're not leaving the galactic community. We're just acting like every other independent species." Representative Kim raised her hand. "What about retaliation? Economic sanctions? Military pressure?" Elena had been preparing for this question. We've been building redundant supply chains for 30 years. Our agricultural worlds can feed our populations. Our industrial worlds can produce most of what we need. Our technology is advanced enough to maintain our infrastructure. Dr. Chun added, and we're not the only species that's tired of major power dominance. The Zephyrians have been fighting consortium expansion for decades. The Free Traders Alliance wants alternatives to hegemony-controlled routes. If we succeed, others might follow our example. The room was quiet as everyone considered the implications. This wasn't the dramatic military action that some had wanted. It wasn't the complete withdrawal that others had suggested. It was something more subtle and potentially more powerful. Representative Wong spoke carefully. You're talking about a fundamental shift in how humanity relates to galactic civilization. Yes, Elena said simply. I am. Admiral Harrison stood up. I've been thinking about this problem for 20 years. Military solutions lead to destruction. Diplomatic solutions lead to endless delays. But administrative solutions. He smiled slightly. Administrative solutions might actually work. Dr. Chun was already imagining the practical steps. We would need to implement this gradually. Start with clear cases where we have obvious rights. Establish precedents. Make it normal before anyone realizes what's happening. Elena nodded. The Galactic Council operates on bureaucratic inertia. They respond to established patterns, not individual actions. If we create new patterns slowly and consistently, they might accept them as normal. Representative Martinez was warming to the idea. It would send a message to other junior associate species. Show them that independence is possible without military conflict. And if enough species follow our example, added Representative Johnson, the balance of power in the galaxy shifts without anyone firing a shot. Admiral Harrison called for a formal vote. All in favor of implementing administrative self-determination within human space? One by one, the representatives voted. Some voted quickly with confidence. Others took time to consider the implications. But in the end, the result was unanimous. Elena felt a strange mix of relief and nervousness. They had just decided to change the fundamental relationship between humanity and the rest of the galaxy. The major powers wouldn't like it. There would be pressure, threats, and attempts to force humanity back into compliance. But for the first time in her career, Elena felt like humans were taking control of their own destiny. Who should deliver the message to the Galactic Council? Asked Dr. Chen. Everyone looked at her. She had spent 15 years presenting human petitions to alien bureaucrats. She knew the system better than anyone. I'll do it, she said. I know exactly how to phrase this so they don't realize what we're really saying until it's too late. Admiral Harrison nodded. Draft the statement. Make it sound like routine administrative paperwork. File it during a busy session when no one is paying attention. Elena was already thinking about timing. Next week is the quarterly trade review. Half the representatives will be focused on economic negotiations. Perfect time for a policy notification to slip through unnoticed. Dr. Chun smiled for the first time in months. How should we phrase it? Carefully, Elena said. We're not declaring independence. We're not challenging galactic authority. We're just informing the Council that humanity will be handling its own administrative responsibilities going forward. Representative Kim laughed. You're going to bury the most important announcement in human history inside bureaucratic language. Exactly, Elena said. The same way they've been burying our requests for 127 years. Admiral Harrison stood up and looked around the room. Ladies and gentlemen, we just made a decision that will change the course of human civilization. Our children will live in a galaxy where humans govern themselves. Dr. Chun gathered her materials. I have a speech to write. Something that sounds completely boring and routine while quietly announcing that humanity is no longer asking permission to exist. As the representatives prepared to leave, Elena looked once more at the map of human space. Soon, those blue dots would represent truly independent human worlds. The major powers would resist, but bureaucratic resistance was something humans had learned to do very well. After all, they'd had 127 years of practice. Captain Ziegther had been running cargo through the Ross 128 system for 15 years. It was the shortest route between hegemony space and the outer rim colonies, saving his ships 3 weeks of travel time. He never expected to find human patrol vessels blocking his path. Hegemony trade vessel Prophet's Edge. "Please state your business in human territory," came the calm voice from the lead human ship. Ziegther's forearms gestured in annoyance. "This is a free navigation zone under galactic law. I demand immediate passage. Ross 128 system has been reclassified as a human cultural preservation zone." The human captain replied politely. "All transit requires advance permits. We can provide you with the application forms." Ziegther had never heard of advance permits for this system. How long does the permit process take? Standard processing time is 6 weeks. Priority applications can be processed in 4 weeks for an additional fee. 6 weeks? Ziegther's cargo contract required delivery within 10 days. Missing the deadline would cost him everything. "This is ridiculous," he snarled. "I've been using this route for 15 years. Previous usage was under temporary authorization," the human captain explained. "All vessels now require proper documentation for passage through human space." Ziegther had a choice. Wait 6 weeks for a permit and lose his contract, or take the long route around human space and arrive 3 weeks late. Either way, he was ruined. He chose the long route. As his ships changed course, Ziegther sent an angry message to his hegemony trade supervisor. Let them deal with these presumptuous humans. But Ziegther's supervisor was dealing with 14 other similar complaints that same week. Commander Veltar of the Vorthic Authority was having an even worse month. The mining consortium he managed had been extracting valuable minerals from the Kepler expanse for decades. Their operations were perfectly legal under traditional galactic usage rights. Then the humans send an official notice. Environmental impact assessment required for all extractive operations in Kepler expanse. Read the formal document. Assessment must be completed before operations can continue. Veltar crushed the message tablet in his powerful claws. Environmental assessment? For asteroid mining? This is insane. His aide, a smaller Vorthic female, looked nervous. "Sir, the assessment requirements are quite detailed. Soil analysis, atmospheric impact studies, long-term geological surveys. The human authorities estimate it will take 2 years to complete." 2 years. Veltar roared. "We'll spend more on the assessment than we'll make from the mining operation." The aide consulted her datapad. "There's also a fee for the assessment. Quite substantial. And if the assessment shows any negative environmental impact, we would need to implement mitigation measures." Veltar stared at the documents. Each requirement was reasonable on its own. Environmental protection was a core principle of galactic law. But the combined effect of all these requirements made mining unprofitable. Who wrote these regulations? He demanded. Human Environmental Protection Agency, the aide replied. They cite 17 different galactic environmental treaties as legal basis for their authority. Veltar had to admit the humans had done their homework. Every regulation was based on existing galactic law. Every requirement had precedent from other systems. The humans weren't breaking any rules. They were just applying rules very thoroughly. Dr. Yara of the Consortium Archaeological Division was discovering the same thing. Her team had been granted permission to excavate ruins on the human world of New Geneva 5 years ago. It had been a routine approval process back then. Now the humans were requiring updated cultural sensitivity training for her entire team. The original permits were issued under outdated protocols, explained the human official. Current regulations require all non-human archaeological teams to complete cultural interaction certification before working on human worlds. Dr. Yaira looked at the training requirements. This course is 6 months long. It includes modules on human history, social structures, religious practices, and cultural preservation methods, the official said helpfully. We also require each team member to work with a human cultural liaison throughout the excavation. A human liaison? Dr. Yusi's tentacles writhed with frustration. We've been doing archaeological work for 3 centuries. We know how to preserve cultural artifacts. I'm sure you do, the human official agreed. But human cultural artifacts require specific handling protocols. The liaison will ensure proper procedures are followed. Dr. Yaira calculated the costs. 6 months of training for 12 team members. Salary for a human liaison. Delays to 3 other excavation projects. While her people completed certification, it would be cheaper to abandon the dig entirely. Across the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out. Trade routes that had operated freely for decades suddenly required inspections, permits, and compliance reviews. Mining operations needed environmental assessments. Archaeological expeditions required cultural certification. Research stations needed safety inspections. Each individual requirement was legal, reasonable, and properly documented. But the cumulative effect was making business with humans much more complicated. The major galactic powers responded as expected. Economic sanctions were threatened. Diplomatic protests were filed. Trade pressure was applied to human allies, but humanity had prepared for this. Admiral Harrison's strategic planning had been thorough. Human agricultural worlds increased food production and began trading directly with non-aligned species. Human industrial centers shifted manufacturing to serve independent colonies rather than major power markets. Human research facilities shared technology freely with any species that wanted it, creating new alliances and reducing dependence on traditional trade partners. More importantly, other species began paying attention. The Zephyrian Trade Alliance had been locked in disputes with the Consortium for 30 years. Consortium regulations made it nearly impossible for Zephyrian merchants to compete in major markets. When Zephyrian representatives saw how humans were using bureaucratic resistance, they began implementing similar policies. Suddenly, Consortium trade vessels needed cultural sensitivity clearance to operate in Zephyrian space. The clearance process required detailed documentation of crew cultural training and took 8 weeks to complete. The Free Traders Coalition began requiring independent commerce certification for any vessels associated with major power trade guilds. The certification process involved extensive background checks and took 3 months. Crystalline Republic started demanding harmonic resonance compatibility assessments for all ships carrying non-crystalline cargo. The assessment required specialized equipment that only crystalline technicians could operate, and scheduling took 6 weeks. Within a year, 17 minor species had implemented some version of humanity's administrative self-determination policies. None of them called it rebellion. None of them claimed to be forming an alliance. They were just applying galactic regulations more carefully. Trade efficiency across the galaxy dropped by 12%. Route planning became more complex as traditional shortcuts required new permits. The major powers found their expansion plans slowed by unexpected bureaucratic obstacles, but the changes happened gradually. Each new regulation was implemented quietly. Each permit requirement was introduced without fanfare. The major powers found themselves dealing with 1,000 small inconveniences rather than one dramatic challenge. Captain Ziegler had to completely restructure his shipping business. Routes that once took weeks now took months. Profit margins that once made him wealthy now barely covered his costs. But he didn't blame the humans. He blamed the bureaucracy, the forms, the delays, the endless requirement for permits and assessments and certifications. He never realized that 17 different species had coordinated their efforts. He never understood that the galaxy's power structure was shifting under his feet. To Ziegler, it was just bad luck and bureaucratic inefficiency. Exactly what the humans had been counting on. Commander Veltar eventually abandoned his mining operations in the Kepler expanse. The assessment requirements made the project unprofitable. He moved his operations to space controlled by traditional allies, where environmental regulations were less strictly enforced. He never connected his problems with similar difficulties his colleagues were having in Zephyrian space, Free Trader territory, and Crystalline Republic systems. Dr. Yara canceled her excavation project and focused her work on worlds where archaeological permits were easier to obtain. She never realized that 43 other senior researchers had made similar decisions in the past year. The major galactic powers were slowly losing influence, one permit application at a time, and they had no idea it was happening. Galactic Council observer Cathari Velnas had been analyzing Council effectiveness reports for 73 years. Her job was to track patterns, measure trends, and identify potential problems before they became crises. She was very good at her job, which was why the current data troubled her so much. Cathari's office overlooked the main plaza of Galactic Station Prime. Through her window, she could see representatives from hundreds of species conducting business, making deals, and maintaining the complex relationships that held galactic civilization together. Everything looked normal. But the numbers told a different story. Trade route efficiency had decreased by 12% over the past 18 months. That wasn't unusual by itself. Economic fluctuations happened regularly. But this decline was different. Instead of affecting specific regions or trade partnerships, it was happening everywhere at once. Dispute resolution times had increased by 37%. Again, not unprecedented. The Council's caseload had been growing for centuries. But these weren't major territorial conflicts or trade wars. They were administrative disputes, permit applications, certification requirements, bureaucratic disagreements that should have been simple to resolve. Most puzzling of all, petition filings from junior associate species had dropped by 43%. Cathari had expected this number to increase as more species joined the galactic community. Instead, younger civilizations were asking the Council for help less often. Cathari pulled up specific case studies. The Zephyrian Trade Alliance had stopped requesting mediation for their disputes with the consortium. Instead, they were handling conflicts through their own administrative processes. The Free Traders Coalition had withdrawn 17 different appeals for trade route access. The Crystalline Republic had canceled 6 requests for territory expansion approvals, and humanity had gone completely silent. Dr. Sarah Chun, who had presented over 1,200 petitions to the Council over the past 15 years, hadn't filed a single request in 8 months. Her last submission had been the standard notification about administrative policy changes. Routine paperwork that Cathari had barely noticed at the time. Cathari pulled up Dr. Chun's notification and read it carefully. The language was formal and bureaucratic, but the meaning was clear when examined closely. Humanity was announcing that they would handle their own administrative responsibilities going forward. It sounded harmless. It was filed as a routine policy update. But in context with all the other data, Cathari began to see a pattern. She expanded her analysis to include economic data from across the galaxy. Major power trade volumes were stable in their core territories, but declining on the periphery. Minor species were forming new trade relationships with each other instead of relying on major power intermediaries. Resource allocation was becoming more distributed as smaller civilizations developed their own supply chains. Cathari had seen this pattern before. Not recently, but the historical data was clear. 3 centuries ago, the hegemony had been a rising power challenging the authority of the ancient Star Kings. They had used similar tactics. Quiet administrative resistance, alternative trade networks, gradual withdrawal from established systems. The Star Kings had never noticed until it was too late. They had been too focused on managing their existing empire to pay attention to slow changes on the frontier. By the time they realized that the balance of power had shifted, the hegemony controlled half the galaxy. Cathari wrote a detailed report recommending immediate council attention to what appeared to be a coordinated movement among junior associate species. She suggested reforms to address growing dissatisfaction with current administrative processes. She proposed new initiatives to strengthen relationships between major powers and smaller civilizations. She submitted her report with a priority flag and a request for urgent review. 3 days later, she received a standard acknowledgement message. Her report had been filed and would be reviewed by the appropriate subcommittee. Estimated processing time, 1218 months. Cathari stared at the response message and felt a chill of recognition. The council was treating her urgent analysis the same way they treated routine petitions from minor species. Filed, acknowledged, and forgotten. She tried to schedule meetings with senior council officials. All were too busy with more important matters. She sent copies of her report to representatives from major powers. None responded. She even attempted to present her findings. During a council session, the session moderator informed her that observer reports were not appropriate for general council discussion unless specifically requested by member species. No member species had requested her analysis. Cathari realized that she was experiencing exactly what humanity and other junior species had been dealing with for decades. She had important information, but no one with power was willing to listen. Meanwhile, the changes she had identified were accelerating. On a quiet Thursday morning, representatives from 47 species gathered in a small conference room on Luna Station. The meeting had been scheduled as a trade efficiency workshop and attracted no attention from galactic media or council observers. Dr. Sarah Chun looked around the room at faces she had come to know well over the past year. Zephyrian trade officials, free trader captains, Crystalline Republic negotiators, agricultural world representatives, mining colony administrators, research station directors. All of them had something in common. They had stopped asking the major powers for permission to exist. The free trade protocols are ready for signing, announced Administrator Park from the Human Colonial Authority. 47 species, unified trade standards, shared resource allocation systems, independent dispute resolution. The protocols had taken a year to negotiate. Every species had contributed something. The Zephyrians provided trade route expertise. The free traders offered transportation networks. The Crystalline Republic shared communication technology. Humanity contributed administrative frameworks and diplomatic experience. Together, they had created something the galaxy had never seen before. A completely independent economic and political system that operated outside major power control. Are we sure about this? Asked the Altarian representative. Once we sign, there's no going back. The major powers will realize what we've done. Dr. Chun smiled. They'll realize eventually. But by then, it will be too late to stop us through bureaucratic pressure. The signing ceremony took 20 minutes. No speeches were given. No media was present. Each representative simply added their species authorization to the digital documents. When it was finished, the galaxy had quietly reorganized itself around a completely new power structure. Nearly 50 independent civilizations had formed an alliance that controlled significant territory, resources, and trade routes. They no longer needed permission from the hegemony, consortium, Vorthic authority, or any other major power. But outside the conference room, nothing appeared to have changed. Trade continued. Diplomacy proceeded normally. The great civilizations continued their eternal games of politics and power. Dr. Chun looked out the conference room, window at Earth hanging in the darkness. Humanity had come so far from the days when they begged for mining rights and waited decades for simple approvals. What do we call this moment? Asked the free trader representative. Dr. Chun thought about all the dramatic moments in galactic history. Wars that reshaped the balance of power. Discoveries that changed the nature of civilization. Treaties that ended centuries of conflict. All of those moments had been remembered, celebrated, studied by historians, and taught to students. I don't think we call it anything, she said finally. The best revolutions are the ones no one notices until they're over. Administrator Park began distributing implementation schedules and coordination protocols. The real work of building an independent galactic civilization was just beginning. Outside the conference room, Galactic Station Prime continued its normal operations. The hegemony negotiated trade agreements. The consortium mediated territorial disputes. The Vorthic Authority processed mining claims. The AI moderator systems managed thousands of routine cases. None of them realized that the galaxy had fundamentally changed around them. In her office overlooking the station plaza, Kithari Velnas filed another report about declining council effectiveness. She noted continued patterns of administrative resistance among minor species. She recommended immediate attention to growing independence movements. Her report was acknowledged, filed, and scheduled for review in 18 to 24 months. Kithari closed her files and looked out at the bustling plaza. Somewhere in that crowd of alien representatives, the future was being decided. New alliances were forming. New power structures were emerging. The balance that had maintained galactic civilization for centuries was shifting, and no one with the authority to address it was paying attention. Kithari had spent her entire career studying galactic politics. She understood that great changes rarely happen through dramatic events. Real transformation occurred quietly, through countless small decisions made by ordinary people who simply refused to accept the status quo. Today felt like one of those transformation points. A moment when history pivoted towards something completely new. But when Kithari tried to document the significance of this day in her reports, she couldn't point to any specific event.